A safe, efficient dive relies on three physical baselines: robust lower limb strength, precise motor control, and continuous tactile feedback. Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, or CMT, is a group of inherited neurological disorders that degrade these physical requirements at a cellular level. Healthy peripheral nerves connect the brain to the body. Their outer myelin sheath acts as insulation, while the inner axon transmits electrical signals. Under CMT pathology, this myelin sheath frays or the axon breaks down, progressively disrupting communication lines to the legs and arms. While this condition slowly worsens over time, it typically targets the extremities rather than the vital organs. Consequently, individuals with CMT generally have a normal lifespan. Because the disease is not inherently fatal or a threat to cardiovascular health, a CMT diagnosis is not an absolute contraindication for recreational scuba diving. However, mapping these microscopic neurological deficits against macroscopic aquatic hazards shows that unmanaged CMT creates a high-risk dive profile. Our goal is to apply specific controls that systematically lower that hazard rating. The most immediate hazard stems from progressive neuromuscular weakness, which CMT concentrates in the lower legs and feet. As nerve signals fail, severe muscle atrophy follows. Without proper tension, the foot shifts into a high arch deformity. During a fin kick cycle, this deformed geometry creates high water drag, forcing weakened muscles to exhaust faster. In later stages, this muscular atrophy can travel into the hands and forearms. This introduces a secondary hazard, making life support tasks like operating a BCD inflator or turning a tank valve physically difficult. We manage these propulsion deficits through specific equipment controls. First, we replace standard stiff fins with low-resistance split fins or highly flexible blades, reducing the muscular load required for every kick. Second, the diver must use custom orthotic boot inserts. Standard boots compress against the high arches and hammer toes, creating painful blisters and pressure points during a dive. Third, standard gear configurations become active hazards. We have to apply precise biomechanical and environmental adaptations to restore the diver's baseline propulsion safety margin. While muscle weakness affects movement, the damage to the peripheral nerves simultaneously cuts the flow of sensory information back to the brain. This loss of proprioception removes the feedback loop required for balance. Sensory signals from the feet to the brain flicker and drop out. Without that feedback, the diver's horizontal orientation shifts into an unstable, tilted position, causing a total failure of buoyancy control. This spatial blindness creates topside hazards as well. A diver who cannot accurately sense the ground is at a high risk of falling on a rocking boat deck or uneven shore entry. Compounding this is the loss of tactile sensation. A CMT diver might suffer abrasions, fin rub, or deep cuts without feeling the pain, allowing tissue damage to go entirely unnoticed. This numbness also masks water temperature. The diver loses the ability to feel the early onset of cold, eliminating their biological warning system for hypothermia or muscle cramps. Because the body's alarms are offline, we have to externalize them through procedural controls. Dive professionals must enforce rigorous pre- and post-dive skin checks and mandate robust thermal protection even in warmer waters. To solve the balance deficit topside, we bypass the physical risk. Operators must utilize physically assisted entries and exits, such as lift systems, to eliminate the hazard of falling under the weight of the gear. When a diver's internal sensory network is compromised, the dive team must build an external safety network of strict procedural checks and environmental boundaries. When neuromuscular weakness and sensory loss combine in an aquatic environment, they generate compounding systemic risks. On this exertion versus time graph, a standard diver's curve remains low, but the strain of stabilizing a CMT-compromised body causes their curve to spike into the red zone. This accelerates breathing, causing CO2 buildup and an elevated risk of underwater panic. In advanced variants of CMT, there is an additional complication: the onset of diaphragm weakness. Compromised respiratory muscles severely lower the diver's exercise tolerance. Demanding maneuvers, such as swimming against a sudden current or executing an emergency ascent, become physically exhausting to complete. This dictates strict profile limits. All dives must be restricted to short, shallow, low-effort plans, with frequent rest stops mandated during both the gear setup and the dive itself. We also have to address an emergency scenario. A CMT diver has reduced self-rescue capacity and cannot reliably tow or assist a buddy in distress. Standard emergency protocols assume reciprocal buddy assistance. Because that is compromised, a CMT diver requires a specifically briefed, physically strong buddy and easily accessible quick-release gear to maintain a realistic safety margin. The underwater hazards of overexertion, unnoticed injury, and buoyancy loss are predictable consequences of peripheral nerve degradation. Because this disease is progressive, yesterday's physical capabilities do not guarantee tomorrow's safety. Regular medical reassessments and continuous updates to the dive plan are mandatory. These required adaptations are documented in a formal personal dive safety plan. By engineering the dive around the diver's specific physiology, we can move the unmanaged high-risk rating down to moderate. The core philosophy of adaptive CMT diving is load shifting. We shift the physical burden away from the diver through specialized gear, and we shift the cognitive burden by meticulously planning the environment. When we systematically apply these controls, we isolate a physical deficits and rebuild the safety margin. By replacing rote standard checklists with a causal understanding of pathology, instructors can successfully and safely open the underwater world to individuals with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease.